launching Sunday worship, though it might not be on a Sunday. Is that enough? Where's pray for us? Pray for us.
Yeah. Lord, thank you.
So, as we look at launching Sunday worship, I'm going to put it through. I mean, again, you have the thing. Please do read it. Some of it's quite technical. I'm not going to go into the technical side of it as much. So, when you launch Sunday worship, it is the end of a process or a stage in a process that will already be happening generally for maybe nearly a year. And what happens, the wise leader, there's a book you can find called, or it's a kind of secular management principle, and it's called No Surprises. Whenever you're surprising someone in a church plant leadership team, something has gone wrong. That moment where you tell people something and it's like, wait, what? That shouldn't be happening. I mean, it might sometimes, but generally it shouldn't. And there have been times as we've moved towards launching Sunday worship when people have been like, wait, what? It's like, what? Sorry, what? What did you think we were doing? You know, why were we here? I mean, it's like, again, I remember talking to Dylan at Good News Churches about time. She's like, we got these people and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, well, you it sounds like you're good to go. You need to go live. And it's like, yeah, but it was, were you in those meetings? And he said, okay, wait, we should go live. Were you there?
No, I don't understand. I don't know about that.
So do you remember, were you at the first meeting at Good News Church?
Well, online, on Zoom.
Yeah. When we started at the deep list, I was there.
Yeah. So it didn't start on Zoom.
So first we started on Zoom for a few months.
Yeah.
And we moved to live.
Yeah, so it wasn't quite. But the point is that there should be these signposts on the way. You should be communicating what's going to happen at every stage of the way. Like it's really important that people know what's going on. And that as you step forward, you take them with, okay, this is going to happen next, and this is going to happen next, and this is going to happen next. And what that means is that at every step, people are going to be investing and preparing for the next stage. They're going to be working towards it. If you don't let them know, then they're not going to be contributing to it. If they know what's going to happen next, you'll find them acting in accordance with what they think is going to happen next. So one of your key jobs as a leader is to communicate why we're all here and how each of those steps fits in with the why we're all here. And sometimes our own fears can stop us being clear. And I've seen this happen more than once. It was like, for example, there was one church plant where the leader seemed to be like hitting the brakes, then the accelerator, then the brakes, then moving the direction. Until I didn't know what he was trying to do. I didn't know which stage we were on. It seemed to me like it stored near to go, we're gonna launch in 2 weeks. It's really important that you keep the why working not just globally, but within each step of the process as you lead up to going live. There was one guy, again, when we first started his church, the guys were in the library. We'd kind of agreed that we would aim to replant 2 years before. And the church had grown, and it was like, well, we're now at like 60 adults, so, we need to split. And he said, well, what about this? What about our Sunday schools? Aren't we just duplicating work? Blah, 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 blah. And the thing is, I think this is maybe him a little bit more than me, but he just thought, well, I don't know if it's going to happen, and I'm not sure I want it to happen. And he just blanked out some bits of these steps. some of these steps. Do you see what I mean? It just not clocked that we were close to actually doing something. And that's partly because British people are just like that. If you say we're going to do it, no one believes you. So, I'll believe it when I see it kind of people, right?
Yeah.
So if you don't talk and you're not very explicit, as you run up to launch, people are not going to be, at least within British culture, people are not going to be, they're going to keep things skeptical. So you've got to keep talking. So you've got to keep the why clear as you do that. The next question is, when? And everything comes from the why. The why goes to the when. Generally, we say you should be 6 to 9 months from when you gather your church plant team. I strongly suggest that you don't let timelines drift.
Yeah.
If you say, well, look, we need to do this. I mean, if you've got like proper hard indicators and they don't happen, critical things don't happen, then you can talk to your team. But otherwise, I remember once going to a church at Easter in Bamako, and the pastor said, they always started late, and the pastor said, okay, we're just going to wait for some other people to come before we start. And it's like, mate, I mean, like, and then people are going to turn up even later because, the wait. And sometimes we can be like that. Church one, you've got to, again, just talk through the process, 6 to 9 months, tell people what to expect, be super clear. We talked about when you met, roughly in terms of venue. I'm not going to go back over that. Here's a really important one. Who? And who works in 2 different ways. The first one is you have to think about this leadership team that you gathered. And the cutout and keep is that if you plant a church and you gather a team, you are going to lose some of that team.
Yeah.
It is going to happen. People join church plants with high expectations, and you will not meet all of those expectations if you're a church plant leader. You just won't. And when you don't meet their expectations, some of them are going to leave. That's the way it is. So you have to be aware of that. You've got to be tough. You've got to be gracious. Again, you've got to be clear as you communicate. Equally, you're going public because you're going to get people. Now, and here is one of the things that many churches struggle with. You form a team, you gather together, you're tied, you launch Sunday worship, and the team want to keep doing stuff. But as you do that, your team is now different from your church, even though it might be 60% of your church. It's like, well, how does that work? It means that people can't join that community. Do you see what I mean? You're keeping the team together can lock people out of the community. Am I making sense?
Yeah.
So
Ben talks about dissolving the launch team on the Monday night session, so overlaps.
Yes. So this is your launch team should be disposable. I mean, the people aren't disposable, but those structures are going to be things that you move past. And again, you've got to be talking about that. I can remember it. I mean, one of the issues in Rochdale is that the church planter was very inexperienced. And so we will be having discussions where I was thinking, like, what are you talking about? And one of them was where he said, can we have another Zoom account? It's like, no, I want you to shut down your Zoom. I don't want you to extend it. And the other thing was that he said, I want us to go away on a team retreat. It's like, mate, you've taken 6 people away and you've got like 12 adults turning up on a Sunday. How are you going to do that? I said, no, you can't do a team retreat. You take the whole church, but you can't take the team. So that's your who. 1. Part 2 is who do you do it for?
Mm.
One of the hardest things in a new church plant is you change the pattern. You gather a team, people who want to help you plant. You launch the church, and then you preach. You've got a choice. You're going to preach to the choir, preach to the converted, or you're going to preach to the new people who might not turn up. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
So I'll give you an example. At City Life Church, you have a problem. It's that you're going across language barriers. You're going across histories. Some people know nothing about the Bible. Some people have known it for ages. How are you going to teach? Now, one of the problems you don't have in City Life Church is like, where are the non-Christians? It's like, that's all good. You're good there. But who are you speaking to? How are you keeping the people in your church being fed by the word of God? So almost like, who are you there? Who are you reaching? And I strongly advise as you head up to launch, keep getting the training. We're not necessarily giving you here. There is an Antioch Network training channel. It talks, but Dom is knocking out videos.
Yeah, I haven't uploaded any of them yet, but scripted quite a lot of them, recorded a few of them.
On worship in Antioch-like churches. First one was amazing, so high expectations. There are also ones for teaching, but as you go forward, I know we're going to be training in a different session, like making sure that you're establishing patterns and rhythms that are good to go for the next phase when you go public. Yeah.
John, should I also share with this group the document on YouTube, top 10 YouTube tips?
Yes.
Specifically using YouTube for worship.
Yes, yeah, exactly. Because quite a few Antioch churches have or currently do mainly use YouTube videos for worship leading. And there are ways to do that that are really good and ways to do that that are less helpful. So I've done a bit of thinking on that.
Yeah.
Adverts, exactly. It's
Right.
like, let's come and praise the Lord, and you get an advert for Grammarly or something.
If you're lucky.
If you're lucky, yeah.
Yeah.
Could be any. Yeah.
But the worst one is like, it's like an advert will come up. It's like, okay,
Jump into it.
well, or it's like, and I feel like saying, excuse me, can I just say, this woman in the advert is not the result of any possible algorithm.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So is that on the YouTube training channel?
So I'll share it on this course group. I'll share the document that I've written on that.
All right.
Over email.
So one of the biggest mistakes, one of the sort of biggest imbalances in Antioch churches that I've seen launching is that if somebody has got a 20-25 minute teaching slot, they'll happily pile like 6 hours into it, 7 hours into it, 15 hours into it, if they're not experienced. That's about 1/3 of what goes on in the service. The rest of the service, they'll barely give it 10 minutes thought. It's just really imbalanced.
Yeah.
People don't step back and think, what are we doing as a community? And as you go towards launch, you have to think it's really easy to overemphasize the teaching bit for what you do.
Sorry, John, could
Yeah.
I add one other thing that we've talked about around prayer leadership?
Yes.
Commonly in Antioch churches, we've seen that there's like a, do you know the phrase minimum viable product in business? It's like, what's the smallest thing that we can, or the kind of prototype thing that we can make? That in Antioch, there's almost like a minimum viable service leading team, which is a service leader / worship leader and a preacher. And if the preacher expects to prepare a message and the service leader / worship leader expects to welcome people and lead some songs, that's great, but prayer leadership falls in the gap. So
Yeah.
Nobody's expecting to lead prayer, which means that often, and we found this at Upper Room quite a lot, that like we just wouldn't really pray together as a community. We weren't really growing in prayer. So with the worship leaders that I've been working with across Antioch, we've been trying to sort of say, if you're a worship leader, you're a prayer leader. Part of what you're doing in leading worship is helping the congregation to pray. So your worship leader, communicate with your preacher in advance of the service. Say, you know, what are you speaking about? Would you like to lead a prayer response? Would you like me to lead a prayer response? So that there is communication there. And you know, if it works, then the preacher can be expecting to help people to pray after their message. That's great. But I've been working with worship leaders, so we're thinking about it from the worship leader's point of view. That's kind of how we try to make sure that when you launch public worship, you don't kind of lose prayer.
Yeah.
Well, and it's not just launching public worship that does it. What happens is that when you launch, all of your plans will tend to click into place, and you'll do what you plan to do. After you launch, the pressures of time will mean that people will drop back into habits rather than things they think about. Does this make sense?
Yeah.
So that what happens is that when you launch, there's this burst of enthusiasm. People are excited, their dreams are coming true, and they'll often put quite a lot of effort into getting it right. When you've been going about 3 months, it's like, I mean, I'll sit there often just because I'm so used to it, I'll be running like mental checklists on the preaching, and it's like, you know, here's at least the minimum, and you'll watch like half of them could be gone. That people are just got into habits, they feel a bit under pressure, they're not necessarily feeling the joy, and they'll stop investing into key bits of the service.
Yeah.
So when you're thinking about, I mean, maybe we've gone on to the next one, not just who, but what. What are you doing on the Sunday? It's really, it's important, again, you go back to your vision and you say, okay, what would people expect to see? And then what are they actually seeing? And that can be hard as a leader. I mean, I remember the church that Pete was at, actually, I think, as I understand it, early on, set the bar very high. Like, you had quite a lot of stuff going on.
Yes.
But it tended to be based around one person doing it, and it basically burnt out, right?
Yeah, there was a lot of that. There was too much reliance on just a small number of people. Yeah, sometimes one or two.
Okay. One key question. So we've done the why, the when, the who, you know, who are you reaching and who are you speaking to? We've done the what in terms of your teaching, in terms of your worship. You have to, when you're launching, you have to think we're becoming an institution. We're going to become an institution. You don't want to be, but you will. You're now responsible if a child gets hurt.
Yeah.
You've got to raise money. You're responsible for your digital point of contact. It's like and it's so important to have people helping you with those processes. You have to be like a calm presence, talking people through all these things as you get ready to go live. Basically, if you're not the person who runs checklists, I really suggest that, you know, you meet from a little way out and just start running checklists, just processing things together. And the last one I'm going to do before handing it back to the floor is, as you do this, it can really seem like a lot. So the question to keep in mind is, who is it all for? And it's for Jesus.
Yeah.
I remember one church planter, again, from the kind of pre-Antioch days, talking about how they had done this Christmas meal, which had been absolute chaos. It had been chaos. Kids screaming everywhere. It's like people just talking to each other. Like no one taking the service seriously. It's like giving her a headache. This was in the Somali wedding venue. And she was there clearing up after the service. And there was a guy who said, "Oh, can I help?" And the waste disposal system wasn't great. He said, "Yeah, could you like clear up some of the rubbish?" The guy did this, finally got out, locks up. She walks past the alley, and the guy's just throwing all the stuff in the alley. So the next step is to kind of, pick out half-eaten mince pies from the dog poo in the alley while the rain is hammering down. And I remember her processing all this. She said, "Church planting is amazing. I am so grateful that God gave me this."
Mm.
And she said it without any hint of irony. She said, "It is my chance to be crucified with Jesus."
Yeah.
So if you looked at what you're doing just as a thing or a task, it can seem oppressive.
Mm.
The only way that it is not oppressive is you work through all this, as you go back to your why, as you talk through the steps, is that, as she put it, I play my life to an audience of one,
Mm.
and that is Jesus.
Yeah.
When somebody dumps a task on me that I don't want, one of my ways of dealing with it is to say, every moment that I'm working on this computer screen, maybe including the times when I'm clicking over to look at cricket scores instead, I'm just going to offer this as a prayer to Jesus.
Yeah.
And so the biggest question as you go to launch, sure, you're going to be answering the big questions, you've got the stuff in your notes, you're going to be talking through the different stages, but the big thing is always remember, it's an audience of one.
Mm.